Bodog poll question. Are you more excited for this Canucks season than last year? Yes or no. You can vote at Sekeres and Price on Twitter. Bodog line of the day from me. Interesting player prop for the NHL season. Connor McDavid versus the field in scoring. McDavid is the minus 230 favorite. The field is plus 170. He won the Art Ross by 25 points last year. So if you're taking the field, you're pretty much banking on a Connor McDavid injury of about 12 or 13 games. I'm going Connor on your Bodog line of the day.
Well, that's not a crazy injury these days, you know?
It isn't.
Yeah.
But by the same token,
that's an interesting bet.
Hey,
let's ask our next guest.
So player props interesting here as the NHL season winds on up. Here he is, Rink Wide's Jeff Patterson, our Canucks reporter, fresh from a weekend in Penticton at the Young Stars tournament. Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing well. I didn't have a power button or a power function, but I did motor home from, not in a motor home, but I did motor my way back from Penticton after Sunday's game. So had a late night drive on the Coke, but made it home safe and sound.
Was Räty as good a navigator with you as he was with Blake on Friday morning when he slept for 4 hours?
Yeah, he wasn't a navigator at all. He was snoring heavily in the passenger's seat, so he seemed to enjoy his ride. I just let him have his beauty sleep over there and did my thing.
Are you like a horse? You can fall asleep anywhere and just be totally undisturbed by your surroundings?
Well, when you work as hard as I do, you gotta get your beauty rest.
Look at this. Look at this. I had music going the whole time. Still didn't take away a minute from his 4-hour nap. Yeah.
No. Jeff, who and what stood out to you at Young Stars?
Well, Aiden McDonough's shot is NHL ready, but I think we knew that. I mean, he scored in his brief appearance with the Canucks late last season. And again, and context matters here because the Canucks had the 4 guys that played in the NHL. They had 9 guys that spent most of their seasons in the American Hockey League. And then they had their goaltender, Nikita Tolopilo, who, led the second division over in Sweden in save percentage last year. Like, this is an experienced Young Stars team. And for 5.5 periods, really, it looked like no contest. Full credit to the Winnipeg Jets on Sunday afternoon. It was 2-0 Canucks midway through the third, and Winnipeg didn't look like it really cared about coming back in the hockey game, but they stuck with it, ended up winning in a shootout. The final result, the scores don't matter. This is a tournament or a showcase, as it were, for individual evaluation. So Aiden McDonough scoring in both of the first 2 games, that's a really good sign that you put him in a position, especially on the power play. He's got a big-time shot, and it just started to make me think that there's this opening in the bumper for the Vancouver Canucks. I don't think he's going to be there this year, but in years to come, it doesn't take much for him to get that shot away. He's got quick release, and he has precision, and both of his goals were goal-scorer goals in the first couple of games at Young Stars. So Aiden McDonough, you want guys like that to step up and stand out, and I think he did. I thought he was better on Friday in the rout over Calgary than he was on Sunday against Winnipeg, but end of the day, did he score? Yeah, he scored in both of those games, and so he left his mark on those hockey games. I thought on Friday, guys, McDonough and Max Sasson were probably the 2 best forwards for the Canucks. And then in Sunday's game against Winnipeg, you had Räty and Arshdeep Bains playing together, and there was no doubt in the first couple of periods that those 2 stood out. And so, again, those are the guys you want to elevate. Those are the guys that we should be talking about, and I thought all of them acquitted themselves relatively nicely. Räty had a quiet night on Friday, but he was engaged. He was, you saw his passing ability. You saw some playmaking. In the third period, he got a little fired up and took a penalty, but it was a roughing penalty. He didn't like the treatment that he got after the whistle. And so even in a Young Star showcase kind of game, there was a little bit of feistiness and fire from Räty, and I'm not sure that that's there every night that he plays. And Arshdeep Bains is just such a heady player, and we heard that when they signed him, and all of the rave reviews out of Abbotsford as this high scorer out of the Western League adapted and adjusted to becoming a pro. And, yes, he scored the first goal on a power play on Sunday afternoon, paid a price, went to the front of the net, got his own rebound. But there were so many plays where just positionally he is so sound, and I think that's the kind of thing that coaches and management and evaluators are going to look at. And if he continues to develop that and just brings that on a nightly basis, I do think that Arshdeep Bains is going to play games in the National Hockey League. Whether it's this year, he may still need another full year in the minor league level, but I was really impressed with Arshdeep Bains, just the way that they used him, all situations, power play, penalty kill, and 5-on-5. I thought he had a really strong outing on Sunday against Winnipeg.
On Räty, and it's kind of it's an interesting player profile here because he's somewhat of a 200-foot center. At least that's what some people think who watch him, despite the fact that he's not a particularly great skater. Chris Faber told us on Friday he's such a good forechecker, you almost think he's better off at wing. He makes a play defensively in Friday's game where the Vancouver Giant Samuel Honzik is taking the putt straight to the net front area from the corner, the Rick Nash-style play. And Räty comes down and just wipes him out and prevents a scoring chance. So he wasn't perfect, but you can see why at, 20, 21 years old, there are some people who believe that he is going to be an NHL bottom six centerman. Jeff, what did you make of the two defensemen who have NHL experience, Hirose and McWard?
Hirose looked good on Friday, I thought.
Well, I thought he looked good in both games. And again, as you would expect, he should.
Yeah.
And, was he dominant? No, but there's just such poise there was poise in the games that he played in the National Hockey League. So, of course, he applies that at this level and just able to settle things down, break the pucks out, got a lot of power play time. He had 2 assists in each game. They only scored 2 goals on Sunday, and he was in on both of them. And so, I thought he kind of just quietly went about his business, put his stamp on things. I will say that I thought maybe we would see a bigger version of Akito Hirose after playing in the NHL, getting his feet wet, understanding what it's going to take to be at that level, and then having a full season. I was a little surprised when I just saw him walking around the rink in sweats after the game. He still looks remarkably slight. Now, Quinn Hughes seems to have been able to make a go of it in the NHL as an undersized guy, but how many of those do you want? How many can you have? And he's going to be in tough. For all that Akito Hirose has done to impress people in this organization, keep in mind that a player like Christian Wolanin has 100 NHL games under his belt, was the American Hockey League Defenseman of the Year, and just has so much more experience at the professional level than a guy like Hirose. And then you throw in a Matt Irwin, Guillaume Brisebois is still in the organization, and I think he's going to want to put his best foot forward. So there's going to be competition on that left side, third pairing, but I think Akito Hirose, used Penticton for what he needed to do, and that is just find his game early on so that when he gets to main camp, he should hit the ground running there. And Cole McWard, I thought, was really good on Friday night. Had a goal, had an assist, had another offensive dash in the third period that didn't amount to a goal, but certainly it was a dangerous opportunity that he created with his skating. I think there's still a fair bit of intrigue around him because he's a right shot guy. He's young and he's 22. And so I think he really would benefit from a full season in the American Hockey League and still trying to figure out exactly where he slots in, what is his game, because he had some points at Ohio State, but he didn't blow the record books out of the water and those types of things. So I don't know ultimately when he arrives as a true pro, what is his game, but he's got decent size, he's got good skating ability, and again, he's that right side guy, and for the longest time that's been a real weakness in the organization. Philip Johansson, again, another guy, a first rounder a few years ago, 3 years of pro experience over in Sweden. You would expect that he would have stood out at this tournament. I didn't think he was great on Friday night. Thought he was a little bit better, just looked more comfortable and a little more confident on Sunday in the game against Winnipeg. But he does not look ready to play in the National Hockey League. I think he's going to need a full year of adjusting to North American ice and the North American game. And I wanted to see a little bit more from Philip Johansson than I did in the first couple of games at Young Stars.
I was going to ask you, with the increased sample size, albeit only a couple of games, if you sort of got a better idea on the profile of these players. You kind of outlined McWard's game there. Did you learn anything more about Hirose's game? Or is the template that we saw at the end of last year, that's still the one that we're working off of?
Yeah, I mean, he's a cerebral player, and I think we got that in the small dose that we saw him at the NHL level. He had 3 assists in the 6 or 7 games that he played, and I talked about the fact that he picked up multiple points in both the games this weekend on the power play. It's not flashy, it's just putting pucks on the sticks in the right spot. We talk about service in soccer. He seems to have that knack, and there's some value in that. He's not looking for the home run all the time, but he's looking to put his teammates in positions to make things happen. So I was impressed with his puck moving in the offensive zone. Again, he gets around the ice. He's not the most fluid skater, but I think he can skate in the modern game. And then defensively, it's just a question of going up against guys that have been doing this for a living for a while, at his size. But again, I invoke Quinn Hughes. there were different ways to defend. Defend with your legs, defend with your stick, positioning. You're not going to run guys through the end boards. That's not his game. But if he can put himself in position to make guys go around him, I think he's kind of got that sense of understanding the plays, the way that they're unfolding. One of those guys that I think is, his reads allow him maybe to be a step ahead of opponents a little bit. And you saw some of that again at that level. But he's facing, junior guys that are going to go back to their major junior teams, other guys that are just turning pro. This is a 24-year-old coming off 4 years of college and a little sample of life in the National Hockey League. So he was expected to stand out, and I think he did. And looking forward to seeing what he takes out of Penticton as he jumps to the next level now, main camp, starting on Thursday.
And the other young stars question I want to ask you is about your dealings and Jeremy Colleton and how you think he did running the bench, because that was a great news story for the Vancouver Canucks last year. Players developed at the American Hockey League level, and that was under the new coach, Jeremy Colleton. So a word or two about what you saw from the Canucks AHL coach, who, of course, has NHL head coaching experience with Chicago.
Right. And I thought it was really interesting just the way things unfolded, that Friday night in that 7-1 romp against Calgary. Well, guess who's behind Calgary's bench? It's Trent Cull. And so, I don't think there's no message sending of any kind at a Young Stars tournament. But for Jeremy Colleton, I do think that there was a time here where Canuck fans sort of feared when they would send players down to Utica or even that first year in Abbotsford that, what kind of coaching were they getting? What kind of instruction and development? I didn't get that sense at all last year, that you've got a guy that's been in the NHL, wants to get back to the NHL. I truly believe Jeremy Colleton will get a second shot, and maybe more than that, but, he's working on one after his time in Chicago. He'll get that next opportunity. And so you've got a guy that's aspiring to get back to the National Hockey League, but I don't think he's in a hurry to get there. But that's pretty good pedigree to have behind the bench of your AHL team. I've always enjoyed my dealings with him. He's a likable guy. I like the way that he sees the game. It was funny on the bench yesterday. I mean, he had his two assistants from Abbotsford, but he also had Henrik Sedin and Michael Samuelsson, and then they had a couple of trainers. Like, he looked like a Subway at rush hour. Back there, like he didn't have room to move, but it won't always be that case once Abbotsford gets up and running. But I think the Canucks have a good one there, and I do think that he's going to be able to continue to develop players like Arshdeep Bains and Tristan Nielsen. Like, we're talking about Tristan Nielsen as a guy that, may be able to make a case for an NHL job at some point. But he'll only get there if he continues to grow his game at the American Hockey League level, and that'll be under the tutelage of a guy like Jeremy Colleton. So I think the farmhands are in good hands with Colleton and the staff that they've got down there. And of course, now the fact that the Sedins are hands-on in Abbotsford, and that, management, whether it's Cami Granato or Patrick Elvine and Jim Rutherford, whoever, even Rick Tocchet said that he made a trip out to Abbotsford just because he wanted to see what was, the whole experience was all about. So, this is the benefit now of having the farm team in their backyard. It's there. It's been established for a couple of seasons. And I think this is a year that you really could see some growth individually, but collectively as the group. And what they're doing. With the
and playing
Canucks.
important games, too, because I think they're going to be a good team again. I would guess that Abbotsford is a good team. They're going to get good goaltending. And so, in the same way that we talk about the Vancouver Canadians being a good proving ground because they're playing important games and in front of people, I think the same is going to be said for the Abbotsford Canucks. They're going to be playing important games and developing that skill as well.
And just on that point, just quickly, we're looking at that team out in Penticton. A lot of those guys will be going to Abbotsford, but of course, there's such a glut of wingers at the big league level, and we saw last year Höglander and Podkolzin. The guys that don't make this team, if they're now maybe there's trades to be had, but they could be getting some support from above as well. And so I think it's going to be a good team, and then you maybe bolster it, with some guys that have NHL experience and just try to make it that much better.
The big guys, brass included, go down for the Jake Milford, the golf classic today for the Vancouver Canucks, and then it's training camp at the end of the week. It sort of feels like it's that time, doesn't it? It's the rubber meets the road here at the end of the week.
It's incredible, really, when you step back. And I don't know if you guys had a chance to, from your vantage point, to look up at sort of the suite that the Vancouver Canucks occupied throughout the weekend in Penticton, but it really is the entire front office, the entire scouting department, you name it, they're there. And I just think, the costs of hotel rooms and everything else. Like, there's no expense spared here from the Canucks perspective. And I think it's a reward for the scouting staff. I mean, some of these guys are, were hands-on, obviously, in drafting some of the players. This is the first chance some of the players to put a Canucks uniform on. But they really do bring just about everybody from the organization. And so Francesco Aquilini was there on Sunday afternoon, but Jim Rutherford and Patrick Elvine throughout the week. The Canucks NHL coaching staff was there. And then, as I said, all of the rest of the front office and the scouting staff. And so lots of eyeballs. And if you're a prospect, I think that's important. I think that was one of the knocks when the farm team was in Utica. Like, I heard stories from players that, they wondered who was watching, who was really doing the evaluation. They didn't know if management was coming in from Vancouver. But now, again, on a nightly basis, there are so many people in the player development department that are there in the building out in Abbotsford when they're playing. And so, I just think you want to know that you're being watched and your good play is going to be rewarded. So, they'll take their findings, and I would imagine here in the next day or two, we'll get a roster for main training camp, and a lot of the players in Penticton will advance. I would imagine they'll send a few of the junior age players back to their respective teams there. But on Wednesday, there will be the day before camp availabilities with Patrick Elvine and Rick Tocchet and a handful of players. I think that's maybe when we'll hear from Elias Pettersson. It may be the first time that we hear from Tanner Pearson and get a true update on him and his situation as well. And I'm told that they're going to have to do it off-site because the Laver Cup has taken over Rogers Arena, so they're getting booted out of their own building for tennis. So I think they're going to do all of the media at the Park Hotel just down the street from Rogers Arena.
Well, let's hope when they get back into the building, it has all the requirements for a proper preseason.
Maybe Roger Federer will leave some goat dust.
Exactly. Bodog poll question today. Are you more excited for this Canucks season than last year? Jeff, what says you?
You know me. I'm excited about every season, but I think there is reason to at least watch closely to see, how much better did they get in the offseason? Like the money that they had, and they didn't have a ton, but I think they spent it wisely. They certainly targeted areas they felt they had to get better defensively on the penalty kill, and then a little bit more of a supporting cast and some more depth, particularly at center. So I want to see a healthy Thatcher Demko, and I hope that he is healthy and doesn't encounter the experiences he did last year, because they were already sort of coming off the rails when he got hurt on December the 1st, but once he went down for 3 months, they didn't stand a chance. So, there's lots of storylines. Obviously, the Elias Pettersson and his future, that is going to be at the top of most people's lists when you think of intriguing storylines. But, even a player like Quinn Hughes, like, how much better can he get? He's already at such an elevated level, but now as the captain, what does that do? Is it any sort of burden on him, or does it fuel him even further? And ultimately, how high can he push his point totals that have already been, he's rewritten the record book twice, and you kind of feel like maybe, if he's got a better supporting cast, if they find the right partner for him, if the power play can improve, I think that there is some growth on the point totals. But we also saw last year that point totals ultimately don't matter when Elias Pettersson's putting up 102 and Quinn's pushing 80, and they're still 10 points shy of the playoffs. So I think there's an understanding on the players front that it is more about the team game, but I think the organization has made some improvements, and we'll start to get a sense of what Rick Tocchet's thinking here at main camp. Defensive pairings and some forward combinations, and I'm really curious about penalty killing duos. You don't often go into a season sort of focusing on the penalty kill, but when it's been as bad as it's been the last 2 years, like, even getting to league average would be a quantum leap for the Vancouver Canucks. So I'm kind of curious to see how they think they're going to go about improving that penalty kill, and who's going to be playing with whom, and who will be first out over the boards. And, they probably won't get to special teams practice until the second or third day, but they are playing a preseason game on Sunday. So I think that they'd have to at least do a little bit of baby steps in terms of some, special teams work. So we'll be there in Victoria. We'll be keeping a close eye and be reporting back on all of those little details. It's the details, guys, that, going to hopefully help this team improve.
Last question here, Jeff, but is the presence and availability of Ilya Mikheyev the biggest story on the first day of training camp? Is there anything you'll be watching?
I think it's past, like, Tanner Pearson always was, but having watched Pearson now a few times, like, I think he's going to be a full participant. I want to hear from Tanner Pearson, just the mindset, and sort of see if he can fill in a few blanks about all that he's been through. But yes, there's now There certainly are some red flags around Ilya Mikheyev, and there were from the moment that Milstein was on with you guys, where he talked about him hopefully being ready to go for training camp, and then the suggestion that they may have to, monitor him, and is he going to be a participant on day one? And if not, what is the process? What's the program? What's the prognosis for him? So yes, I would say beyond utilization of players and sort of getting a sense of Rick Tocchet's thinking with some forward lines and defensive pairings individually, for me, Ilya Mikheyev right there at the top of the list.
Yeah, I think has to be. Marvelous stuff. Jeff, thank you for this. We'll catch up later this week.
All right, guys. Sounds good.
This Sekeres Price clip brought to you by Bodog. Make a play at Canada's choice for free casino games, sports odds, and poker strategies.